is our other host, Martin Pytela, health coach. And we're going to get started talking some more about stress. And a lot of people don't believe it or know, but what you stick in your mouth can cause you a lot of stress and also inability to deal with the stress you have in your life. Right after this. Okay, welcome everyone. We do this every Thursday. We talk about a topic for about 20, 25 minutes, maybe 30. And then afterwards, we have what I call the after party. So if you have any questions, any comments, put them in. And if you have questions that are not related to today's topic on stress and nutrition, hang on to them. And at the end, we'll talk about anything you want to talk about. So with that, Martin, we've been talking about stress the last couple of weeks. And what we eat and put in our mouth can cause a lot of problems.
Definitely that. And besides that, what we don't put in our mouth, as in stuff we need to have in our mouth, is also a problem. So this is a two-sided problem. One is, do I have enough of the right stuff that I need? And do I eliminate the wrong stuff that I shouldn't have? And the lists are long. Very long, right? Today, Scott and I were musing about iodine. Interestingly, iodine is linked to cortisol in this following way. The cortisol hormone is what's released by your adrenals in response to stress. And cortisol has a funny side effect. It puts fat on your belly. So if you find yourself unable to lose the fat pouch that's right in around your belly button, you may be not coping well with stress, and you may be generating too much cortisol, and you may not have the antidote to cortisol available. And there are two. One is the herbal mix that we call cortisol ease, and the other one is abundant presence of iodine. Any thoughts, Scott?
Well, I hadn't thought about not having the proper nutrition causing stress, but I think that's really right. If we're eating poorly, we don't have all the iodine we need, for example. We've got extra cortisol. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, maybe I need some extra cortisol ease or iodine because I've got a little bit of a spare tire I've been trying to get rid of.
Right. Well, there are two main reasons, right? If you happen to be the thyroid body type, both of which are how should I say that in proper English? Both of us are the thyroid body types, which includes the tendency to love carby foods, as in donut or a cookie after dinner is highly desirable, right? And the other thing is, of course, when we do gain weight, it starts right at the belly, at the front, right? So if we tend to be apple shape or even pear shape, that's usually the thyroid types.
Right.
So the story of thyroid, or story of iodine, really, is such that some people genetically need a whole lot more of it than others. If your ancestors lived mostly inland, more than 80 miles away from the ocean, the level of iodine drops off in the soil. And so you or your ancestors lived in such way that they would have to have lived on less iodine. So they adapted. But if your ancestors were coastals, as in like British Isles, England, Scotland, Norway, Sweden, Germany, France, whatever, not inland, but coast,
right.
Then your ancestors made you require more iodine.
Because their diets would have been high in it with a lot of seafood.
Right. It's in seaweed, as in kelp, which they have used as a free source of fertilizer. So on the coast, the winter storms push a whole lot of seaweed onto the seashore. free fertilizer. They would collect it with horse-pulled rakes, like by the
Right.
loads, and they would haul it into their gardens and fields.
Same thing with Japan. Like there's been a lot of talk about parts of Japan where they live very long lives, and one particular island, it's, you know, they just pack on the seaweed and then they grow their food.
That's right. Yeah, the island most known for longevity is Okinawa,
Right.
which is not a single island. It's a whole bunch of islands, but Okinawa is the biggest of the lot there. Anyway, in Japan, in general, the consumption of iodine is anywhere from 20 to 100 times greater than what's common in America.
Wow. So this isn't something you can OD on.
Actually, no, I've tried. I once, my normal dose is something like 6 drops of the thyroid, nascent iodine. And so I pull that out of a bottle that has a dropper in the neck. Simple little thing, and it just comes out 1 drop at a time. But I was at the end of the bottle, and I wanted to pull the plastic thing that sits in the neck of the bottle. And it just wasn't going. So I was using my teeth now, creative boy. So I just bit on that and I pulled, and I sucked in that whole thing, probably 100 drops of iodine. Wow. And what it did, it actually burned the tip of my tongue. Like there was a purple spot right on the tip of my tongue for about 3 days.
Wow.
And for the next 4 days or so, I felt decidedly warmer than otherwise, which is interesting, right? Like people with low thyroid function find themselves less resilient to colds. These are the people that will bundle with extra sweaters or blankets in the evening, especially in the evening. Cold feet, cold hands, that's a sign of thyroid underfunction, hypothyroidism, which is so darn common, because I think about 40 or so percent, maybe more, of the population in America are the thyroid types.
And they have underperforming thyroids.
It's a common problem. Indeed.
And the solution is just to have more iodine.
Yeah. Simple.
Yeah. So what's the best way to take it? Like the drops that you take it, do you put it under your tongue or?
No, you put it in water. That stuff is so concentrated, it tastes horrible.
And this is a common theme in that, donuts, French fries, pizzas, pasta, they all taste really, really good.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't necessarily help our nutrition that much. And the stuff that really, really tastes good, we've got to really force down. That really works well, we have to force down.
Yeah, more like that. Yeah. In general, we have this preference for sweet and smooth and, not just that, right? Crunchy, or at least mouthfeel, all of that. Like there are these special pleasures of the mouth, let's call it that. And the industrial food producers really work it hard. They really, I would call it food porn. They create foods that are so seductive that you just can't resist it.
Yeah. Well, and they have chemists that are working on these chemical combinations, and then they test them and they can see what taste buds spark up and which ones don't, and which ones give the most pleasure and which ones don't. It's not really fair.
Right. But what's interesting is that, of course, there are these 3 main types. And the thyroid folk really prefer sweet and carby tasting things, whereas the adrenal dominant people, they actually like savory, and they like different style. And then the third one, the pituitary, they actually like creamy, as in whipping cream, ice cream, fluffy, creamy things. And so there really isn't one food to please all. So you cannot make the universal food, but a cookie or a donut, that's the please the thyroid dominant. a sausage and bacon and an omelet and whatnot. That pleases the adrenal.
Right. So we have a question, and I think it's a good one based on what we're talking about, which is how can I positively know that I do need iodine supplementation?
Right.
Or a test for it?
Sure thing. There are two common ways. One, you can take iodine. If you have tincture, if you buy the stuff from us, it's called thyroid-type, you would make a patch about 2 inches in diameter on your wrist or somewhere, like back of your arm or somewhere invisible further down, and about a patch 2 inch in diameter. And if within about an hour the thing is gone, your body is absorbing it quickly, that is a sure sign of deficiency, like right now deficiency. And the other way is this: temperature check in the morning. First thing in the morning when you wake up, before you get out of bed, check your morning body temperature. If it's at 98.6, you're doing it just right. If it's above that, you're overperforming on the thyroid. If it's below 98.6 Fahrenheit or 36.8 Celsius, if it's below that, then you are not taking enough iodine. You need to stimulate your thyroid to do better.
Cool. I got the link. Oops. I have the link for
iodine in general, or
I'm just gonna put it in the comments for everyone that wants to take a quick look at it.
Yeah.
And I'll just show people what it looks like too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually quite straightforward. There are on the market 3 main ways to get iodine, right? One is the tincture, which is called nascent iodine. This is what you're looking at now. The thyroidine is one of the nascent iodine, atomic iodine. It comes with many, many names: atomidine and what other names did they come up with? Well, anyway, nascent iodine. It's a tincture in alcohol, electrically treated. It's the recipe by Edgar Casey, and this is definitely a non-toxic, cannot overdose form of iodine.
Cool. One day I was wondering about iodine, and I had this, and what I did was I put it on here.
Okay.
I just put a drop on, and it disappeared. And then I put a drop on, and it disappeared. And then I put another drop on, and it disappeared. And it all disappeared. And then like 3 or 4 days later, I have little like iodine blisters popping up, because it was like it went into the body and then it came out of the body. And I was just floored by that. It was not what I was expecting at all.
Yeah, I wonder if that was some sort of a rejection, allergic reaction, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't feel like, blowy nose or sick or anything like that. But it was just that I thought it was really interesting. It all went in and then it all came. I shouldn't say all came out.
Right.
I don't know how much
it reacted.
Yeah. It reacted.
Yeah. So the other common form is called Lugol's solution, Lugol. We don't sell that, but it's commonly available in pharmacies. And Lugol's is a combination of I2, as in molecular iodine, and Ki, which is a formula for potassium iodide, and it's a mixture of the two in water. And that's the common iodine tincture that you would, if you're old like Scott and I, you would remember it from our childhoods. If you scraped your knee, they would put iodine tincture on your wound to sterilize it, because iodine is really aggressively antibacterial and antiviral, whatever.
And it's funny we don't use it anymore. Like you would.
It's too cheap.
Too cheap.
Yeah. Pharmaceuticals like to prescribe a bottle of antibiotics.
Right.
Yeah.
And here you go, have that, put it on.
Yeah. So that's the second form. That's the artificial human or man-made forms. And then there are natural ones, all the seaweed in the world. kelp, which in Japan would be called, what the heck is kelp called? All of a sudden I'm having a brain. They have names like hijiki and wakame and nori and
nori.
well,
So there's
nori is
lots of names for kelp.
Not necessarily kelp, right? Like kelp, as in Laminaria digitata, is this one particular plant, and that's the green goo stuff that you see floating in miso soup in Japanese food. That definitely is kelp. Anyway, they have multiple forms, and each one of them is used differently.
So you can add it to your meals, or you can add it to your soil in your garden.
That's a fact. But anyway, so we started about stress, and we started about how stress will push the cortisol hormone forward, and cortisol will deplete iodine. And by depleting your iodine, you will end up not only with thyroid dysfunction, where you will be keeping weight on and not able to lose it, feeling cold at times. If you're a female, you would probably end up with fibrocystic breasts, PMSE, estrogenic problems, because iodine and estrogen are each other's antagonists. So there's a whole lot going on with the stress affecting iodine, affecting hormones, affecting your hormonal life. Cysts are one of the common consequences of low iodine. And so you can have cysts or nodules. So you can have breasts, like fibrocystic breast. You can have a cyst on an ovary. And you can have a nodule on the thyroid itself. So a lot of times people get diagnosed with thyroid nodules, which then the doctors say will turn into thyroid cancer. And yet that probably just is a rampant deficiency of iodine. And then men get prostate problems. Prostate hyperplasia, as in enlarged prostate, is also associated with deficiency of iodine. So it's just so connected. Stress begets you, deficiency begets you more problems.
Right. So let's talk about some other stresses. Like, for example, when I get stressed out, I comfort eat. I will
the pacifier.
Instead of being a baby and putting a pacifier in my mouth, I put a chunk of chocolate, or I'll have an ice cream, or I'll say donut, but I don't usually have a donut anymore. I used to have lots of donuts.
Yeah.
So I need to, and those people that have the same issue need to shift from a bad response to stress to a good one.
Right. Huh. Well, one surefire way is don't have it at the house, right?
Right.
Like,
what happens when I don't have it at the house?
You go out and buy it?
No, I open the cupboard doors like 25 times. I just go right around the kitchen.
Or you go look. Oh, it's not here. Then you come back in 5 minutes to see if it didn't show up.
That's right. I mean, I know it's not, and there's nothing in there that I'm going to want to eat, but I keep looking, I keep open up.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Yeah, that's the hard one, right? Like if you are a thyroid type and you have carbo desire, you open the potato chip bag and you don't have just 3.
Right.
You just keep going until the bag's empty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is not supportive of your, or it's highly supportive of your waistline. It's pushing it outward. Okay. Well, so how did you phrase it? Other problems. Well, okay, I'll stick with the thyroid types since we are addressing it. So if you're the thyroid body type, the stuff that happens to you at 8 p.m. is really a reflection of what you didn't do right at around 8 a.m. The 8 a.m. thing, you should have had a breakfast that included some protein. The thyroid type folks do best when they actually eat a breakfast. The intermittent fasting is fantastically good for the adrenal types because they can go without a breakfast and a cup of coffee for lunch. But the thyroid types, they do best when they eat 3 meals about the same size with protein at each. And it doesn't have to be a lot of protein, like 1 or 2 eggs, a piece of meat, no bigger than half of your hand, right? Like this size, this thick. Not a lot, 2-3 ounces. That's the best you can do for the thyroid type. When you do that, then you will have a less likely episode of cravings. And then Scott mentioned chocolate. Chocolate's an awesome piece of nutrition because it stimulates the alkaloid called anandamide. Anandamide is something that is released as a neurotransmitter, and it's peaceful or peace generating or elevating your mood. So it's settling you down. So when you have had a stressful day, you want to push chocolate. Why not? And magnesium. What's interesting is that cocoa is rich in magnesium, so hits at the same time. But you could supplement with magnesium topically because that magnesium activates the rest and repair, the peaceful side of your autonomic nervous system. So when you do that, you will less likely have cravings and looking for things. Yeah.
So I guess if we're going to talk about chocolate for a minute, I'm assuming like milk chocolate is probably not as good as dark chocolate, and 10% dark chocolate is probably not as good as 90 or 100% dark chocolate.
Yeah, that anything over 70% is hard to eat because it becomes really bitter, right? Like the more you push the chocolate ratio, the more bitter it gets.
Right.
So,
although if I see it 70 or more, I'll buy it. If I see it's under that, I won't. So
you can
push the bitter, and it doesn't. After a while, I guess it's like anything, right? You get used to the taste.
Yeah.
So 100 is like, it's a little hard to take, but the 80 or 90, particularly if it has a little chunk of caramel in it.
Oh, funny.
Defeat the purpose, why don't you, Scott?
No, it's not. Again, people get all excited about sugar, right? But here's an interesting bit. Glucose in the blood is what's the problem. And glucose gets into the bloodstream from carbohydrates, and something like wheat or potato or rice is delivering to you starch. And starch is composed of 3 chains of glucose, pure glucose, brrr, three lines of it. So when you digest it using amylase, the enzyme, it falls apart into individual glucose molecules and raises your blood glucose quick. Sugar, sucrose, is composed of 1 glucose, 1 fructose hooked together. So it's only 50% as intense by volume compared to starch.
Okay.
Because fructose, the stuff that makes apples or oranges or whatnot sweet, is actually way less glucose generating because it's fructose and it's not nearly as it doesn't swing your metabolic system as much.
Okay. So if we talk like diabetics have these highs and these lows if they eat too much sugar, starch, if they have too much glucose, right? Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is if I had a choice between eating some sugar versus eating some potato, in terms of the glucose going up and down fast, the sugar is slower.
Yeah, that's right. And you can study the table of the concept called glycemic index.
Right.
And glycemic index, white potato is 110, pure glucose is 100, sucrose is around 80. Sucrose being typical sugar that comes either from sugarcane or beet. Yeah.
Yeah. So like in many cases, it's not about getting to zero or not eating anything that not eating a potato or not eating sugar. It's about not eating 20 pounds of sugar today and 20 pounds of potatoes today. Right?
Yeah. Here's an interesting factoid, Scott. Potato or other starches, when cooked and chilled, drop their glycemic index significantly.
Oh.
So cold potato salad made with potatoes and then eaten tomorrow is actually really way healthier than steamed potato eaten fresh now, or baked potato.
Baked potato, yeah.
So that's kind of interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. So we're getting closer to the end of our time today, Martin. What would be your general advice for people who are feeling stressed, and then, how can they use the food that they're eating to give them the energy to deal with the stress, or the calmness to deal with the stress, or not make it worse?
Yeah, there are so many techniques that you can enjoy or deploy. Scott already mentioned the pacifier effect of food, right? When we are stressed, we want to put something in our mouth. When we were 4-year-old, we would be sucking our thumb. Smokers solve it by sucking on their cigarettes. It would be intelligent to try and keep your mouth busy on something that's low calories and high fiber. So eating carrot sticks is way better than eating a bucket of ice cream. I can imagine that you will find yourself in stress times, and you need to try and be mindful of that. Just be conscious. Decide, okay, I will get stressed. I will have moments of when I need to pacify myself somehow. So come up with more or less destructive ways. Right? The most destructive will be the chocolate bar or candy bar, I should call it. The mostly wax lecithin and something artificial. Or anyway, eat something that is harder to eat. Eat something that requires quite a bit more work than something as simple as a cookie or a donut. Be ready for that. Just make it less calories and more time.
And I think you hit on a really key point that I want to emphasize, and that is preparation. Like, we know we're going to have days at work that are stressful. We know we're going to have days with our significant other or our families that are stressful. We know that we're going to drive down the street and people are going to cut us off and it's going to be stressful. So knowing all of that, and then knowing how we react. I need a bowl of ice cream, for example.
Yep.
And what is the alternative? I often say this in regards to habits. You can't stop a habit. You can replace a habit. So I really want a bowl of ice cream. Oh, well, there's a bowl of carrots and celery. So I'm going to have one or two of those before my bowl. And then by that time, usually I don't need the bowl of ice cream anymore. Right?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So like you said, you have to be awake. You have to be paying attention. You have to understand what it is that you do in certain situations. And then you have to prepare. Because if all I have is ice cream in my freezer and I don't have any carrots, guess what I'm going to eat?
Guess what? Of course.
Right?
And this is the classic. They show you the commercials where somebody's looking inside of the fridge and there are two choices. There's a slice of a cake, wedge of a cake, and I don't know, 2 apples. And they go, and cake comes out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Cool. Well, thank you very much, Martin. Really appreciate you sharing all of this with everybody. And as I said before, we do this every Thursday, so make sure that you sign up or subscribe. And I believe in the comments there is a link to our Facebook group that we have. And if you have any questions, you can always put them in there.
Yeah.
We're going to do a little video. And then after the video, like 2-second video, and after that, we're going to have what we call the after party. If you have any questions, put them in the comments, and Martin and I will do our best to answer them. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. All right. So I'm going to have to order some iodine.
Of course.
Of course. Or a bunch of kelp.
Or you just go to the seashore and order yourself some seaweed wraps or whatever the heck they do.
Seaweed wraps, right.
Yeah. Go to the Japanese restaurant, have a wakame salad and a miso soup with kelp.
I look for miso soup every time I go to a sushi restaurant, and they don't have them down here in Panama.
They just don't.
Miso soup. They just don't have it. I don't think they've heard of it.
Yeah, I guess hot soup is not the thing in tropical countries. Right?
Actually, it's not by the water, because that's where it's hot. But the highlands, no different. And in Medellin, there's a Vietnamese restaurant it's pho, right? So it's a Vietnamese soup, and it's just like every other Vietnamese pho I've ever had, which was what made me really happy about it. And the owner is Vietnamese American, so he knows what he's doing.
That's what you want.
It was really good. Really good. So there's a few people still tuned in.
Okay, great. Well, ask questions. Don't just sit there.
That's right. We're here for you. And the biggest, and like our hockey team in Vancouver, where I'm from, is in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They're ahead 3-2. And of course, every game is high stress, right? Like it's like we think of it as exciting, but I'm thinking of it, it's like, I gotta.
Yeah, you're pushing the adrenaline button on and on and on. And that's why football and all the other sports event parties are just such potato chip and popcorn events. Right? And beer, of course.
And beer, yeah.
All of which is high carb.
Yeah, so doesn't help.
You're about as anti-fitness as you can be watching a high competitive
That's right. Well, I'd be far better off going for a 2-hour walk and then finding out the score when I got home.
Yeah, you would be enjoying the twittering of the birds and the burbling of the brook, and
that's right.
And so that's peaceful.
That's peaceful. And then you get home and it's like, they won, that's good, or they lost, that's bad, and then you're done.
Yeah,
there's not the ups, because in the game, I watched the last couple of games, it's like, they almost scored, and they almost got scored on, and I mean it's just up and down and up and down. Yeah, it's about as bad as a horror movie. Mm-hmm.
Where you are anticipating the creepy thing.
Right.
Don't open that door.
Don't open that door. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Oh yeah, she opened the door.
And here we go. So what are some of the other things besides iodine that people could do to handle their stress?
CBD is awesome. Hemp. So with hemp, you have this problem. It's been bred for recreational use, where the THC, which is the alkaloid that pushes your time distortion and mood distortion,
right,
it makes you giggly and all of that. They pushed that high, but in the process, they pushed the CBD down. But what's really interesting is that CBD is the chemical that is made by our own body, by our own nervous system.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of funny. Hemp plant has been on the planet since about 30 million years ago, but endocannabinoid receptors have been in creatures as far back as 500 million years ago.
Oh.
So the hemp is a secondary to the cannabinoid that is produced in all creatures that have a spine, right?
Okay.
Like, or all vertebrates.
Hmm.
And there are two main receptor sites or receptor types, one in the nervous system and one throughout the body. So if it hits you in the brain, it's calming, it's anti-anxiety, it's just, I would call it like lubrication for the machinery of your emotions.
Okay.
A bit of sand in the gears. Right? So if you could visualize yourself irritable and just grinding in every possible way, you take CBD, it's like you put a lubricant in, it smooths out all the edges. You just do so much better.
Oh, very cool. It's interesting you bring up hemp because I was just reading an article, and this guy in, I don't know if he was Peruvian or not. I don't think he was, but he basically used hemp rope and he made himself a raft. And then he went to Tahiti on this raft.
Yes.
And he said, I did it to prove that the indigenous people of the Andes could very easily, using their archaic technology, their primitive technology, whatever you want to call it, have figured out how to get to Tahiti.
Mm-hmm.
How you would know there's a Tahiti there, that's a different question, but they would have.
I think being highly intuitive and connecting to the universal consciousness, I think you have to be able to read the waves and read the stars in a way that's probably out of reach to most ordinary modern human.
And that's the way it is in Hawaii, because about 4 visits ago in Hawaii, I was talking to some people that one of whom was a kahuna. So I was asking, like, how do you learn what you learn and everything else? And it was all about being in touch with the world, like listening to the waves, right? Listening to the wind, watching the birds. And they knew there was something out there, because there would be these storms and coconuts that weren't the same as their coconuts, or tree trunks, or there were things that were washing up. And if everything is coming this way, then there's got to be something over there that made those
upstream.
things. Yeah, it's upstream, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, like that's really amazing,
right?
Because they did, like they were going, in their canoes, hundreds and thousands of miles.
Thousands, yeah.
And there would be the kahuna of the canoe, which sounds kind of weird when I say it that way, but he would be or he or she, I'm not sure how that part worked, would be saying, that's the way.
Yeah, a little over this way. Yeah.
Yeah, and they would all do, and there's an island, right?
Yeah.
Like, how'd that happen?
Can you imagine on a flight from Los Angeles to Honolulu, that airplane is off target about 90% of the time. It's the correcting of finding the place, right? So they would have to be targeting to find it. But I wanted to say 2 things. One is to finish the thought about the CBD. The other receptors, the ones in the periphery, in the body parts, they will calm down the inflammatory response. So if you have things that are joint pain and back pain and muscle pain and tiredness and whatever, it's good for that. So you need to be not buying the recreational weed that's going to get you high. You need to be buying the medicinal stuff that's going to be healing.
Right.
And the second thing I wanted to throw at it was, as you were talking about the kahuna and the mindset, which is this: in order to communicate with others without words, in order to communicate with nature and creatures without words, you can, using your nonverbal communication. However, in order to do that, you must drop your defenses. You must be as vulnerable and as open as a child, in that innocent willingness for them to see you essentially naked, unpretended, before you can open to the other side.
Right.
And that's in our society, the way we modern industrial society are raising ourselves and raising our children is completely different, because
Right.
we're
In that way.
we're raising each other to have a public face, the mask, right? Like, you don't really want to know that I pick my nose or burp on a Tuesday, right? Like, that's just, I will withhold that, and I will withhold anything about me that I think is diminishing my
Or
value
unacceptable.
in your perception,
Right.
right? So I will make myself look smarter, better, stronger, all of those things that will make me look stronger than you.
Right.
At least that's the male thing, right?
They all become the mask.
Yeah. And so once you build that, you lose the ability to communicate with nature, because the only way to communicate with nature is to drop all that.
Right. Yeah. And everything we've done over the last 50 odd years has been anti what you just said. You reminded me of my parents when my dad and my mom were dating. So this would be like
100 years ago.
100 years. Well, yes, 100 years ago.
No, not
And
quite. But
they were on a farm. You know, that both of them grew up on a farm, two different farms, and they were in the middle of the prairies. And there were no farms like next door. Like the next farm was a mile away, sort of thing, right? And lots of wheat. So there's lots of space, lots of animals, and there are a number, you know, more people now than there were now. Like there was a lot more people around, but generally speaking, it wasn't a city, and it was a lot of alone time or quiet time, I guess. So my mom and her three brothers are sitting in the living room, and my dad's sitting with them. And my dad says, you know, nobody said anything for like half an hour. They're just sort of sitting there, right? And or some maybe longer. And then finally, the oldest one gets up and starts putting on his jacket. And then the next oldest, and then the other two, and all four of them. And my mom looks at my dad and says, like, you know, what are you sitting there for? Like, let's go. My dad's like, what are you talking about? Like, where are we going? And she's treating him like he wasn't listening to a conversation, because everybody knows we're going to Fillmore, we're going to go do this, we're going to go do that, even though no words were spoken, right? And I really think that those four brothers and sisters were telepathic, and that they were just communicating without having to really talk, right?
yeah. Yes.
And my poor dad is the outsider, so he's not tuned in, and he's
Right.
like,
No.
what is, you know, what's going on? Smarten up. Aren't you paying attention?
Yeah. Tune in, open up.
Open up.
Yeah. And so what's interesting, that this family might have had a channel open where they felt safe with one another.
Yep.
Right. And so they would have opened a window, a door, or a channel on which they were able to communicate, despite the fact that most of us are closed off.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and of course, they would have all grown up together. They would have all spent like all day for every day, like usually together. They would go to the same school, which was a one-room schoolhouse, you know. And so it was kind of like they would have been really, really in tune, as opposed to now when one's in grade 1 and one's in grade 3, and maybe they're in a different school, and one's going to karate and one's going to ballet, and
then they would be communicating through the devices.
And they'd be communicating, which would, of course, cripple the spiritual connection,
the intuitive channel. Yeah.
The intuitive channel. Yeah. So anyway, I didn't plan on getting into telepathy.
Well, but it's part of our lives. You open up with the kahunas, and that's the channel on which this happens.
Right.
And we, people living in the industrial society, have mostly closed that off.
Yeah.
To our detriment. Maybe.
Yeah. Not in tune with the planet, not in tune with our local environment, and not in tune with the local people around us, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't feel your pain.
That's right.
Yeah. You have to tell me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's like, how am I supposed to know? Right? You're not
Yeah.
telling me. Well, because there's a whole bunch of other ways that I've been telling you, but you shut those
channels are off. Yeah.
those fiber optic wires between you and I have been snipped.
Like that. Yeah.
Right?
Huh.
Cool.
Okay. Well, so about stress, right? The more stressed you are, the more you feel like you're cut off from all of this around you. Stress tends to isolate you more, and relaxation allows you to connect more.
Right.
So,
And I think a lot of people don't realize just how much stress they're under.
yeah, the quiet time, right? Do you have the ability to take a breath or two or three and center and reconnect within and reconnect with the higher power and
Right.
I don't know whether you call it universal consciousness or God, or I don't know what name you want to pick for it.
Yeah.
It's universally available to all. It's just that some people have labeled this and other people have labeled that.
Yeah, it's a label, which doesn't help.
Well, it separates us.
It separates. That was my point.
Yeah, and of course, the separation is really horrible because we humans are essentially a tribal creature.
Yes.
We do best when we are together with others and when we collaborate and when we actually do something for others.
Yeah.
Service,
being of service. Yeah.
being
huge.
of service is actually tremendously healing to the person who's doing it.
I know I have at least one friend that said to me once, I was really, really depressed. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." And he says, "Yeah, you know what I did?" I go, "No. I went to the food bank and volunteered, and I served all these people."
Yeah.
And he said, "I felt so much better."
Yeah. Doing something for others.
Yeah.
Even if it means digging graves.
Right. Oh.
Well, it's a service.
Right. I'll serve food at the food bank.
Hey, listen, just before I came up here to get me ready for this talk, I was listening to a piece of news that said that there were bodies stored in cold storage somewhere Eastern Canada because the families were not rich enough to pay for the burials or cremations or whatever it is. They just didn't have the money. So they asked the hospitals to hold the deceased in cold storage until they save up to be able to do this. I'll talk about stress.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Unpleasant, unwanted, unneeded.
Yeah. Ooh.
Okay, well,
we have to end this on a positive
that's
note.
That's nice and morbid of me. Yeah,
that's nice and morbid. Let's talk about something lighter and fluffy.
Well, okay, so stress. Okay, the opposite of it is probably joy, singing,
laughing.
Laughing. Yeah.
One of the things that I find that I do, like when I work and then I want to take a break. One of the things that I do, not the only thing that I do, but I'll go on YouTube and there's 3 or 4 comedians that YouTube now shows me because I've watched some of their stuff, right? And usually it's a short, so it's under a minute. Sometimes it's a 3-minute video. And I have a belly laugh and I'm just like, okay, I'm ready to go back and do whatever I got to do next because I'm not going to spend all day watching YouTube videos. But I just found that in particularly when there were times when it was like the day was dark for whatever reason, then I just found that 30 seconds of laughing or the break, because now I'm focusing on something totally nothing to do with anything that I was doing before to be really, really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Reset.
Yeah. And the laugh, like we need to laugh. But
Laugh is good.
say children laugh 372 times a day and adults laugh once every week. And I'm totally exaggerating what the number is, right? But
Okay.
not enough laughter, right?
Yeah. Endorphins. Endorphins are the chemicals in your brain, which are the opposite of the stress hormones
Yeah.
that allow you to reset, you can forget the pain. When you are engaged in something really interesting, you can completely set aside whatever pain you have.
Yeah. And I have a fun relationship with my mom because I'll say something and I don't mean it. Like, it's not a joke. Like, I'm not trying to tell her a joke to get her to laugh, but I'll talk about something and it's funny. And then she just has this laugh from deep in her stomach that comes out. And it just makes me feel happy, happy, happy. Because my 90-year-old mom is just, she's happy, right? She's laughing. There's no worries in the world. And,
It's all good.
And it's all good, right? So
Yeah.
a little bit of what you were saying before about being of service, but also just the sharing of the laughter. Right?
Yeah, the communion. Yeah,
the communion,
companionship, all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I started talking about us being a tribal creature, right? We need to be with others, and in doing something for others, we find a great deal of satisfaction.
Yeah,
and it's de-stressing. It's anti-stressing when you, in fact, do it. So, okay, I'll describe it this way. I saw a video from Haiti. There were a bunch of 20-something-year-old strong-looking men sitting around among ruins, waiting for someone to hire them to do something. And the most obvious thought to me was, people, all you had to do is just get together. The time will pass regardless. You're strong, you're young, you can take the physical stress. Just start working.
Right.
Don't just sit looking around the wasteland that's all around you. Anyway, I think the cultures, the societies that have nurtured this spirit of willingness to do for one another, to just simply do the right thing, will be the ones that endure.
Right.
Yeah. And that's where the religion comes in, right? Like we were talking about spirituality, religion, whatever. The church-going folk are like that. They will build a church together. They will build a barn together, stuff like that. Right?
Yeah. No, there's no compensation for that work.
No, you just do it.
You reminded me of a video I saw. This old lady is trying to cross this busy street, and she was probably white, although that wasn't the point of it. But this car stops and these two black guys get out, and one takes her walker and the other carries her.
Just picks her up.
Yeah, and takes her across, and and their car is stopped in the middle of the road, like, and nobody's going, right?
Yeah.
Everybody waits. You don't hear any honking.
Yeah.
Really
just admiring the act of kindness.
Yeah.
Makes you feel better about humanity for a moment, right? Yeah.
Good. I think that's a good place to end this. Thank you, everybody. We still have people watching, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Oops.
You made your